Welcome to our podcast, folks. Today we're diving deep into a comprehensive review of Cambodia's young generation, their demographics, their aspirations, political values, social relationships, and even their media habits.
I'm really looking forward to this. So, starting off, how does the review describe the sheer size and diversity of Cambodia's youth?
Well, the review tells us that youth, defined loosely as those between 15 and 30, or even a broader age in some parts, make up almost half of the population. That means we're talking about a generation born mostly after the tumultuous Khmer Rouge era, quite a shift from ancestors shaped by conflict. It underlines not just numerical strength, but also how their unique experiences, like post-war rebuilding, urbanization, and improved access to information, set them apart.
Yeah, it's striking. And what I found really interesting was the focus on the rural-urban divide. How does that shape the opportunities available to them?
Absolutely. The review stresses that youth in rural areas are facing major challenges. Their education is less accessible, and economic opportunities are limited compared to urban youth. For instance, many rural youths have to walk kilometers to reach school, and when they move to cities, they face the huge costs of living. Meanwhile, urban youths enjoy better facilities and resources.
And that obviously influences their life trajectory, right? With rural youth leaning more towards early employment and migration because of these disparities.
Exactly. It's like, a double-edged sword. Rural youth, mostly from modest backgrounds, are forced into early work life, often in agriculture or as migrant laborers, while urban youth get a chance for higher education and job opportunities. This gap exposes growing inequalities even among the same generation.
Right. But then there's also a discussion about their expectations and aspirations. What do you think are the main drivers behind their hopes?
The review really highlights that most young people are motivated by a desire to be materially better off than their parents. They eye urban migration, better jobs. Really, they're searching for economic security first. It's almost as if the promise of improved material conditions overshadows broader political ideals, at least for many who come from economically constrained backgrounds.
So, would you say that political interest takes a backseat to economic survival?
To a large extent, yes. Even though there are signs of political engagement, like voting turnouts and some local political participation, the majority of youth seem more fixated on employment, stable wages, and basic needs. They're more pragmatic. It's a survival thing, you know?
But then there's a twist. Some surveys mentioned in the paper show young people also expressing a desire for democratic participation. Isn't that a bit contradictory?
True. And that's where things get a bit complex. On one hand, youth participate in elections in large numbers and engage on social media to express political opinions. On the other, most of their civic actions are not as robust as what we might expect in a truly vibrant democracy. It's like, they appreciate the idea of democracy, but are cautious because of economic uncertainties and entrenched corruption.
That makes sense. Priorities shift when immediate needs are at stake. But I wonder, doesn't that risk marginalizing critical political reforms?
I'd say that's a valid concern. It's almost like some of the political tolerance they have might mask deeper challenges. There's an element of risk-averse behavior, where, despite a clear desire for improved governance and accountability, many shy away from direct dissent because of familial and cultural pressures. It's a delicate balance between preserving stability and pushing for change.
Speaking of familial pressures, the review spends a lot of time on relationships with family and community. How do those traditional ties affect the youth's independent political and social actions?
Great point. The study emphasizes that in Cambodia, traditional values, respect for elders, and filial piety are still very much in force. Youth are expected to listen to their parents and older relatives when it comes to everything from choosing a university major to supporting a particular political party.
Right.
That means even when a young person may hold a fresh perspective, they're often constrained by these deep-rooted cultural norms.
It sounds like these cultural norms are both a support system and an obstacle. Is there any mention of how technology might be altering these dynamics?
Yes, indeed. The review dives into the role of media and technology in redefining these relationships. For instance, although youth still rely on elders for trusted news, the internet, and particularly platforms like Facebook, has become a vital channel for them to access diverse sources and to articulate their political views. It's fascinating because while traditional media remains trusted, digital media is gradually altering the playing field.
That transition is really interesting. But don't you think that because of this digital surge, urban youth might be leaving behind rural youth even more?
Absolutely. And that's a concern flagged in the review. Urban youth, with better access to smartphones and high-speed internet, are engaging more in political discussions and, often, in civic participation. Meanwhile, rural youth, hampered by limited digital infrastructure and literacy, risk being further marginalized. It's like, a widening information gap.
Exactly. And that gap doesn't only affect political knowledge, it can really shape future employment and social mobility, right?
Yes, right. The review touches on how access to information can be a catalyst for acquiring skills and opportunities, not just for civic matters, but also for economic advancement. So, youth who can harness digital tools are positioned to benefit from a more dynamic economy, whereas the rural and underprivileged might fall even further behind.
I also noticed the review points out some significant gaps in the literature up till now. It sounds like much of the research is largely descriptive, isn't it?
That's spot on. While there's a wealth of empirical data, surveys, demographic projections, labor statistics, there isn't as much of a deep dive into causality. For example, how exactly do economic hardships influence political attitudes, or how does family influence alter civic participation? The review calls for more theoretical frameworks that can unpack these relationships in detail.
And it even suggests that future research should incorporate an intersectional approach, right? Differentiating by gender, ethnicity, and geography.
Exactly, yes. A finer lens is needed because Cambodian youth are heterogeneous. There's urban versus rural, rich versus poor, and also gender differences. For example, the report pointed out that young women, despite facing similar pressures, have different migration dynamics and ways of engaging politically compared to young men. This complexity begs for more nuanced studies.
I find it interesting that in the context of political participation, some young people are very active online but hesitant offline due to traditional norms. How do you see that playing out in terms of long-term democratic change?
It, sets up an intriguing dynamic. On the one hand, online platforms allow youth to experiment with self-expression and political dialogue in a relatively safe environment. On the other, their offline political engagement is tempered by cultural restrictions and practical economic constraints. It's a bit like having two parallel worlds, one digital and liberating, and one traditional and, well, restrictive. The challenge for policymakers, then, is to bridge this gap and create spaces where young voices, both online and offline, can merge to drive real change.
That sounds like a fertile field for future initiatives. But I wonder, could this duality also foster a kind of political ambivalence among the youth?
Exactly. And that's a critical critique. While many youth show enthusiasm for voting and take pride in participating in elections, their actual engagement in policymaking or in sustained political activism remains low. This ambivalence could very well be a product of the environment they're in, where material needs overshadow political aspirations.
Yeah.
It's a tension that reflects, in many ways, the living reality of a society transitioning from a turbulent past to a modern, but still fragile, democratic future.
Speaking of tension, what do you make of the conflicting values around corruption and integrity that the review mentions among the youth?
That part was quite revealing. On one hand, youth express a strong desire for transparency and good governance. They're not fond of the widespread corruption. Yet on the other hand, many are willing to compromise their own integrity when, say, a small bribe might benefit their family. It's as if The pervasive nature of corruption in the system forces them into a sort of moral gray area.
Right.
This dichotomy is yet another example of how economic and social pressures can shape ethical behavior.
That's a tough spot to be in, and it really highlights the need for more in-depth ethical studies in such environments.
Definitely. And this review doesn't just lay out problems. It also points toward future research directions. It calls for more detailed, intersectional analyses to truly understand the factors behind everything from migration and employment to political participation and cultural change. Essentially, it's a roadmap for scholars and policymakers alike.
It sounds like these future studies could be key in guiding policy decisions that might help bridge the digital and rural divides, or even encourage a more integrated form of democratic participation.
Exactly. It's like opening a window into a more nuanced future. The review emphasizes that understanding how youth's economic, social, and cultural capitals interact can inform both development policies and democratic reforms. It's a call to action, really.
And on a related note, there was also discussion about how traditional social structures, like family and religious organizations, continue to shape these young lives. How do you see technology and modernization influencing those age-old dynamics?
That's a fascinating tension. On one side, traditional values rooted in family hierarchy still hold sway, dictating everything from vote choices to migration decisions. Yet technology is gradually empowering these youth to question and even redefine these norms. It's like a gradual restructuring of the social order, one where exposure to global ideas through digital media could eventually challenge established traditions.
Wow, there's so much to unpack here. It really gives us a lot to think about in terms of how demographic changes, economic pressures, cultural traditions, and modern technology all interweave in shaping the future of Cambodia.
Absolutely. The review is a rich tapestry that, while acknowledging many challenges, also opens up paths for future inquiry. Whether it's better integration of rural youth, enhancing political literacy, or fostering a more inclusive digital space for civic engagement, it's clear that understanding Cambodia's youth is key for the nation's broader development and democratization.
Thanks for walking through all these insights with me. It's truly an engaging and complex picture of a generation in transition.
My pleasure. And thank you, everyone, for joining us as we explored this multifaceted review of Cambodia's young generation. Till next time, keep questioning and exploring these dynamic social shifts.